All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Rob and Beth Crittenden. It's December 11th, 2020. We're in Dayton, Oregon. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
First question, and most important question for our purposes, is why wine?
You want to answer it, or should I?
I can start it.
Okay.
We met in college. We met at university in the 80s, and just started exploring wine while we were in school together, and went on from there, exploring Virginia wineries as that industry was just beginning, and kind of getting to know those before we moved to the Pacific Northwest after we married in 1985, and then started exploring in a big way the wines of Washington and Oregon.
My story is a tiny bit different. I'm from Virginia, going to school in North Carolina, and in Virginia, the drinking age back then was 18 for beer and 21 for wine. But in North Carolina, it was 18 for wine. So it was kind of a forbidden fruit to be in North Carolina. So I could go to the store and buy wine and try it out, and I started tasting these wines and thinking, these are really interesting. They're so different, yet they're the same varietal or whatever it was. And I started...
Same words on the label.
Yeah, right. Same, I didn't use the word varietal for sure. And I just felt that very interesting, to be the complexities of the whole, that two bottles of wine with the same grape could be so different. So, but yeah, we also found visiting wineries early on was a great way for a young couple to go do something that's free. I mean, frankly, we would go there, it would be a great weekend outing to go and not spend a whole lot of money and go meet. And then we just found out that we found all the differences in the wineries very interesting. And that was really early Virginia wine industry.
Was there something about wine as you started drinking? Was something about it that appealed to you? Was the idea of wine? Was the taste of wine? What was it about it that kind of brought you in?
For me, the historical connections to both American history and world history, I've always found that to be very interesting. The long family, to realize these families that go on for generations, but also the idea of different places and we later became known as terroir, or for us anyway. That was just very interesting as well, very compelling. So, but I think when we lived, I made a corporate move. I was working for a multinational company at the time, and they moved us to Seattle shortly after we got married. We moved to Seattle to be in the Pacific Northwest, Western Canada. And same thing, the Washington wine industry was still quite young, and the Oregon wine industry was still quite young, this would be the mid-'80s. So we started visiting wineries here as a great weekend adventure, and started making some connections, not for business, but we just found it interesting. And we found Oregon to be a beautiful area, green and moist, but a very pleasant place. And if you compare Washington and Oregon, we found the Oregon industry to be more collaborative. And even in the early days, and there weren't that many licenses in 1985, so we got to know people. It's to us, it's still pretty relaxed here, but it was even more relaxed in the mid '80s, and so it was great. And the very first thing, had an offer shortly after we got here to work harvest with Myron Redford at Andy Vineyards. And we did. And we started doing that for the next several years. We'd come down for his harvest party and got involved in that. And that was sort of our first, real event to do something like that, to actually harvest grapes. I think remember we picked Riesling in the pouring rain in late October 1985. I don't have no memory of what that vintage was, except that it was really wet when we picked grapes.
Did you enjoy it? I mean, was that something, the harvesting of grapes, was that something you enjoyed?
Oh, absolutely.
And the fact that the community of people that would come from Portland and other places, I suppose, would come there and just have it was so exciting, and everybody was jazzed up, and it was just a great event.
So for two kids who had just moved across the country and he was working out of our house, so we didn't have a work community, we didn't have family here. And all of a sudden we just dove into this wine community, and we're very welcomed, and it just became part of our community.
You mentioned that the Oregon industry in the 80s, small, not a lot of life. Tell me what your kind of impressions were of the people and of the wine as you were getting to know the area.
We were learning about wine ourselves, so I don't know if we ever, we could probably say this winery has more interesting wines than that winery, but as we were young and inexperienced, that I don't know if we tried to do a lot of listening and as much tasting as we could do, but we didn't know where this would lead. We had no idea, and it wasn't until several years later that we got this ridiculous idea to move back east and become the representative for the Pacific Northwest on the Mid-Atlantic, because the wines weren't being sold much there. Very few. There were a few people there at the time. There were a few people selling wines in Virginia, where we were focusing at the beginning, but not many. And there were so many wines. Washington and Oregon, but particularly Oregon.
Well, so what made you want to take that leap as you're getting forward? You're getting into the wine industries. You're enjoying wine. You're learning wine. What makes you take that next step and decide I want to sell wine? I want to sell it in Virginia.
We had
Naivete, insanity.
yeah, I had no clue what we were doing.
we really didn't.
We both have an entrepreneurial spirit, and in our first we go back and look at our first anniversary cards to each other, talking about how we're looking forward to running a business together. That's something, I guess, was just something that in the back of our minds, and so we had grown to know more and more winemakers over the years. And when we decided to move back east, after both of our kids were with us, we'd had 2 children and a cat, and decided to move back east to be closer to family. We started thinking about missing our community here, and the trips that we were making back east showed us that they were not represented there, and we came up with this idea. And I called from Seattle, from our home in Seattle, I called Virginia ABC Board and said, this is what I'm talking about doing. So buying wine from wineries and then selling it to wine shops. And he said, that would be a distributor. I said, yes, that's it. That's it. So that's the naivete, yes.
Tell me about that experience then. As you have the idea, tell me about the next step, like actually making it, implementing it, and then finding interest.
Well, first of all, really it was sensible for me to keep my old job.
Yes.
So my company that moved us out here in 1985 moved us back in 1993. And we had the idea that we would wait a while and let me kind of get my feet on the ground with a new job. I was doing a lot of traveling. When I was here, I was traveling a lot in Pacific Northwest and Canada, but ultimately they started sending me to South America. And when I moved back east, they started sending me to Asia. So it was kind of sort of ironic. I moved from the Northwest and go back east and then travel to Asia, but that's what I did. And so we were trying, but the idea was I'd keep my job so we wouldn't have to take any money out of the business. We could support ourselves with my job, and then Beth could spend most of the time, and I could do what I could with a full-time job in helping the business grow. And that's what we did for 3.5 years, is we let the business grow before I finally put in my resignation in fall of 1997. And it was in fact, we were going to start the business later, but let's just say the job that I had at that time was not going in a good direction. So I think we decided that maybe we got to step up the timing. And it turned out to be great timing. 1994 was a good time of growth in the wine industry, and it was right for for the time period for Oregon to make that first statement. When it really wasn't in the Mid-Atlantic at that time. There were a few. Dave Adelsheim was there. Kristen was there. Bethel Heights was there, I think. And some of the people, even the people that we represented at the beginning, had tried before, and the distributors tried them. Probably it was pushing a rock uphill, and they gave up. So some other ones that we started representing at the beginning, we were probably their second distributor.
Starting a business for our family in 1994 was a different story because he was traveling to Asia, and we had a 1 and a 4-year-old. And so we were the classic minivan company, and I'd strap the kids in the minivan, and the 3 of us would make deliveries. So it was that was a hard hard part, but definitely well worth it. Both of our kids definitely grew up in the business.
Sometimes people in our industry, at the wholesale level, will refer to a minivan distributor as some sort of like a negative connotation. For us, it's very positive because that's how we started.
It was red.
You keep your overhead low, and you just have this the enthusiasm to go out and sell wine, and you make the deliveries yourself, and you do everything. You're the janitor and you're the president. You do everything to try to keep it together. And of course, Beth did that with 2 little kids in the car, so she'd make deliveries with kids in car seats.
And we finally hired our first full-time employee after 18 months, and so it was the 2 of us, and he just retired last month.
That's amazing.
So 26 years later.
That's
25
amazing.
years later. Yeah.
So I want to approach this from both sides. So I'm curious, first of all, about the Oregon side of things. So what were you looking for in Oregon wines, and what was sort of the commonality among the wineries you wanted to distribute in the early days? What were you looking for as kind of as a customer in the early days?
Well, first, I think that we thought that because Washington grew Cabernet Merlot, which was very popular at the time, and other things, but particularly Chardonnay, Cabernet Merlot, that in the end, representing Washington and Oregon, that Washington would be more successful for us, and it was quite the opposite. So that's how we began. But I think a lot of it was we had the obvious relationships like Myron Redford. We had those in a couple in Washington the same way, but the handful of the wineries we already knew. And then other ones were just, again, there weren't that many licenses. So when you looked out, you say, okay, who else is out there that represent really the main core of the Oregon wine industry that really should be represented at that time just in Virginia. And that changed later. But and so it was, we represented Irie, Sokol Blosser, and along with Amity, Oak Knoll, up near Hillsborough. There was a handful of wineries because there was just a handful of licenses.
Who were big enough to even export to another state, who were interested.
And were they? You mentioned that you were the second distributor for a lot of people. Some people had tried before and struggled. Did you have to do a lot of hard selling?
Yes.
Tell me about that process of convincing people you could do your job.
Oregon makes wine.
Hard selling to the wineries?
Either wineries first of all.
Okay,
I'm curious about that side first of all.
I think probably some people felt sorry for us and just bought the wine.
Well, but for Oregon to convince growers. Was we were shocked coming from other businesses at sometimes when we'd call and we'd say what we were doing, or we'd come by and they'd say, yeah, sure, how much do you want? And this, and give us credit terms. It's like,
yeah,
really?
working for a big company and placing a purchase order and saying, do I need to pay you in advance? They said, no, we'll give you net 30 days. Like, really? I mean, you wouldn't say it. You'd think that. Really? You're going to give me net 30 days on a brand new business? I have no credit? They give me that, but they did. It was just complete trust. Operate on complete trust. But we've always had as a pillar of our company to pay earlier on time, and that's just, it serves us all well.
in advance and first orders a lot.
Right. Exactly. So, but yeah, so early on, the idea that somebody would sell us wine on credit for a brand new business seemed lunacy, but we were happy to take it. But we always honored that.
But I'd call, even from Seattle, before we moved back east, I'd call some of the people that we had met and said, this is what we have in mind. They say, cool, that's great, we're with you. And I'd walk out of the office and I say, guess what? So it was kind of shocking how open everybody was and how supportive. But not surprising in retrospect.
In retrospect, right.
The collaborative nature, yeah.
And then on the other end, as you mentioned, Oregon, not exactly a brand name at that time, barely a brand name now. Tell me about convincing people of Oregon.
It's a brand name.
It is in Virginia.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of our producers, we heard a lot of our producers over the years saying, wow, the Oregon selection in Virginia is better than it is in Oregon. Now, Virginia and DC and Maryland, as we work, they're very big Oregon states now because, we got started early. So we had that many more years on so many other states.
So tell me about the early days there of introducing Oregon wine to that market.
I'll tell you just an interesting story. We were telling this the other day. Is I think the first market visit was Susan Sokolblosser came to the market. So this would have been probably late 1994. And I still had my other job. And, you know, small companies, you have a hard time retaining people because you can't offer benefits and all that. Some of the jobs are part-time. We had a sales rep in the middle of the state in Richmond, and that person quit just before Susan's visit. So I had to take a day off work, drive to Richmond, meet Susan, and we went out to a wine shop that was pretty well known at the time. And we went in and we talked to the guy and we showed him 4 wines. Susan did a nice presentation, and the guy said, "Did you know that we make wine here in Virginia?" And Susan said, just very sweetly, she said, "Yes, I did know that. Here's the difference. In Virginia, you can find Oregon wine, but in Oregon, you can't find Virginia wine." And the guy took it very well, but it was really true. It was like, that is true. A lot of places make wine, but Oregon is successfully distributing wine in other states. People are finding it something that they want to buy.
What about, do you have an idea what it was that appealed to that market about Oregon wine? What was the selling point for you for Oregon wine? Why did it successfully distribute there?
You know, I think that if we could successfully translate to the customer our own experiences, because, you know, we always say with every wine there's a story, and if you can somehow, without, I mean, it'd be nice to put everybody in a car and take them to Oregon and show them around, then you got it made, right? And that's it. They're sold.
And we do a lot of that now, actually.
But we do it in small bites, right? But if we could take every customer, I've said that for many times, if you just get all these customers in the car and bring them to Oregon and show them, then business is easy. But I think when we tell them our story and they see our enthusiasm, I think a lot of them will take it. And then it's a matter, then they have to sell it to the next level. It doesn't necessarily translate to the consumer. So that also involved a lot of night and weekend tastings where you're standing in a wine shop, and our salespeople still do that to this day. Of course, everybody does that, you know, in the wine industry. Is you stand in some wine shop or whatever, and you're tasting out wines and telling the story of the wine and teaching people about it.
And a lot of at-home dinners. A lot. You know, I'll look over some of the pictures that I gave you and remembered all these different dinners that we did and tastings at our own home, because our first warehouse was a 20 by 20 self-storage unit.
Self-storage unit with an air conditioner.
Yeah, that we got a friend to hook up an air conditioner in it. So we didn't have a tasting space.
And nowadays, you know, there's all kinds of things can be done with Zoom and others, being able to get samples to people and have them taste, and the person can be in Oregon, or they could be in Sicily for that matter, and talking to people and selling wine that way. So technology is also allowed for that. But no, I did a lot of weekend tastings, night tastings, wine dinners, all those sorts of things to continue to push that rock uphill. And it wasn't until a year or two before the movie Sideways came out did Oregon really start breaking loose, and it started getting easier. And when this was 10 years later. This was like 2004, 2005, right along there. There was the momentum came where literally we had to add more wineries because we couldn't get enough wine. There were also some short vintages in there, some low yielding vintages, 03, 04, 05. So it was hard to keep the pipeline flowing. And we added so many wineries at that time just to try to get wine to sell from Oregon. So we went from, famine to feast.
You mentioned earlier the story, telling the story, and obviously we hear that a lot when people are selling wine. You're selling the story of those. Tell me about that from your perspective, since it's not you, you're not the ones making the wine. You're translating someone else's story, or you're helping them get their story across. What about a story appeals to people? What are the stories you found to be successful, and why did some wines sell better than others based on the story?
Every winery has a different story, a different relationship with us. So it's more translating not only the story of the winery, but how we interact with it. Why it's compelling to us to bring it to the customers. What's compelling in the bottle, and what's compelling about the people that we know and love at the winery.
And as far as the both the terroir and the wine and the mark of the winemaker. Sometimes we have many cases where our customers, being the owner of the shop or the owner or the restaurant, the som, the whoever it is that's the buyer at the restaurant, they may love particular producers of ours, but they don't buy the wine. They love the story, they love the person, but they don't like the wine. That's okay, because they find another wine that they like, that kind of goes. So you also have that going on. People come there and say, "Come on, man, you love it." But yeah, I just can't do that, or my customers don't want that. But so sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's okay, because that's why there's so many different wines in the world. It's okay. We'll find something. In this case, we'll find something from Oregon for them to buy that they find to fill that need.
So obviously, with Oregon, you're talking about Pinot Noir largely is what you're selling in the early days.
Pinot Gris.
Pinot Gris.
Yeah, Chardonnay was pretty rare at that time.
A little bit. So the
yeah.
Brick House were early ones.
Yeah, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris.
And obviously, you mentioned Sideways and the effect that Sideways had on Pinot Noir in general and Oregon Pinot Noir. I'm curious, in the early, who was drinking Pinot Noir? Were you finding that it was that people were looking for it? Were you finding that it was mostly soms who enjoyed it, or were you finding that people actually wanted to buy it to distribute it?
It was kind of an S curve. It started off slowly, and we pushed and we pushed and we pushed, and then it got a little bit easier and a little bit easier and a little bit easier, and then then it let loose. And people always credit Sideways, but it happened before that. That just poured gasoline on the fire. We didn't need Sideways. Oregon had already busted loose within a couple of years before that. Things had started to go kind of crazy.
But in the early days, when we started with 15 growers.
In Oregon?
No, just.
Oh, overall probably, yeah.
But and the customers that we called on wanted to support us. I mean, they saw me carrying a case and a kid and trying to hold on to a toddler, So they were very supportive of us, and because of that, they wanted to buy something from us, and what we had was Oregon wine. So they did. They bought it. If I had gone out on the market with South African wine, they may have. We might be in a different place having a different conversation, but that's how we started, and that's what we had to sell, and so that's how they supported us. So
granted, to make it all work, we did add other areas of the world. We did that fairly soon. So people came to us looking for a small distributor that could really give them the attention they desired, and so we started picking up portfolios from Europe.
in California.
But it's always been our heart and soul has been the Pacific Northwest. Absolutely. And particularly Oregon. So so to this day, we're still, as much as we have a great Italian portfolio and a great French portfolio and a great Spanish portfolio and a sake portfolio, we're still the Oregon guys. And I think we will always be the Oregon guys. And that's okay, because people come to us people look at our portfolio and they go, for instance, a producer that maybe we'd like to represent here still, and they'll say, "Ooh, you have a lot of Oregon wines," and that is true, and that is because we're the Oregon guys, and they're going to come to us for Oregon wine, and that still happens today. Because we were talking to somebody this week about selling champagne. We have some great champagne producers, and why don't we sell more of these producers? And people say, "Well, you're not my champagne guy. You're my Oregon."
So I'm curious, as you were growing, especially as you were trying to add to your portfolio, as Pinot Noir and Oregon wine was starting to kind of boom, what do you look for in a client? What do you look for in someone whose wine you're going to sell? What are the kind of the key factors for you and someone you want to do business with?
You want to answer that? No. I'll answer that.
You're the one that in the business I've always concentrated in operations, and he's in sales and marketing. So we found early on when a grower called us and I saw how expensive their wine was. Not Oregon, fortunately. It was an importer. And I said, "Are you kidding me? People buy this stuff?" So they took me off those calls very quickly. So you're a better one to answer what we're looking for.
With the size of in the case of Oregon, in the size of our portfolio, if we're looking at someone new, or someone comes to us and really wants to show us their wine, they can make really, really good wine, because there's so much great wine being made. Never better than today. I mean, it keeps getting better in this state. Just the know-how as the, and I think that it comes from the collaboration of the wineries that probably does it as well as anywhere in the world. But if somebody new comes along, there's with the amount of wineries that we represent, and the fact that there's wine available to sell, it's not like the mid 2000s that there's wine to sell. There's got to be something that's like maybe a terroir that is missing in our portfolio. Something like something particularly maybe an AVA in the state that we're not well represented in because we really hadn't found anything until we have found something. So like that.
And we've also found that if we can't buy based on our own tastes and preferences because those don't match the thousands of customers across Virginia, DC, and Maryland. So we look for a broader perspective, but you had a.
No, we really do both. I mean, there's certainly edgier wines that only appeal to the real, I don't want to say nerds, but the people looking for stylistically or terroir, whatever it happens to be, they're looking for that. We will buy them because say this should be in our portfolio, even though we know it's going to be a tough go because you're going to have a much smaller market, and then you might have something that's we say cast a wider net, so you have kind of a mix. If you go out there and just fall on the sword and just sell the really difficult stuff, you won't stay in business. The stuff that you like personally, but maybe other people don't match the same way. That's what we're faced with.
Or we'll be back to a minivan company.
Or we'll be back to a minivan company. That's true.
But you put it really well yesterday, talking to a grower about how you can point to every single wine and every single brand winery in our book, and give a compelling argument for why it's there. There's a reason.
If I can't make that argument, it shouldn't be in our portfolio.
Right.
You mentioned AVAs, and I'm curious about your obviously the AVAs in Oregon are fairly new. The fact that we have more than just Willamette Valley and the valleys with all the sub-AVAs. Is that something that has caught on outside the state? Do people now recognize the various sub-AVAs?
That's a really good question. I'd love to talk about that. It has, but at the beginning, I think Oregon jumped on it locally faster than the national market could catch up, and I begged producers to keep the word Willamette Valley on the label. Willamette Valley is still to this day, the strongest word. And our friends down in Southern Oregon will cringe when, because we represent some growers outside the Willamette Valley, just not many. But Willamette Valley is still a very, very strong marketing idea for the association. It's a lot of our producers, when the AVAs came into place, they immediately took Willamette Valley off and put on Eola Amity or Dundee Hills, and people would say, well, nah, I don't want Dundee Hills, I want a Willamette Valley one. And talk about pulling your hair out. And beg the wineries. And gradually come back around, I think, to doing that, because it is a big selling point still to this day to have Willamette Valley. But over time, people are understanding, particularly our customers are understanding better now. How well that translates to the to the end user, let's say the consumer, I don't know. I wouldn't know where that is really so much, but I do know that it's over time. It's taken time,
and we spend a lot of time educating our own sales team and our customers by again bringing them out here, doing a lot back in Virginia and DC. We spend a lot of time talking about the different AVAs and the growing regions. I would say
particularly our sales team is very well educated on it, and I think our top customers are very well educated on it. I just don't know how it translates to the consumer. If you were to pull the average Pinot Noir drinker, let's say, and pull them aside and say, tell me about the differences between the Dundee Hills and Eola Amity and McMinnville and Yamhill Carlton, and see what they say. That would be an interesting exercise.
That'd be a very interesting exercise. Even here in Oregon, that would be an interesting exercise. So tell me about you mentioned you kind of, about 18 or so months in, you hire your first employee. Tell me about the kind of the growth of the company and the expansion and sort of what your kind of goal was at the outset and if you've sort of followed the path you anticipated.
No.
Goal?
We started our business, and still to this day our warehouse is in southwestern Virginia, which is more rural, but it was where we were based because of my job. And our crazy idea at the beginning was to sell Pacific Northwest wines in the southwest part of Virginia.
It was going to be a part-time company.
Yeah, it was going to really be part-time. exactly. And we really didn't think it would grow that much. And quickly we started getting calls from the areas like northern part of this Virginia, in the DC suburbs, which is a really, it's a high population area, and also a lot of restaurants, a lot of wine shops. And we started getting calls from there. We started getting calls from Richmond, the center of the state capital. And so we quickly became a statewide distributor, very quickly. We never thought that happened. That was number one that happened. And the other markets, the DC and Maryland came later. But no, it didn't go that way. And in the beginning, of course, we thought we were going to be Pacific Northwest only. And then we quickly added California. And other people heard about us and would come to us and say, would you be interested in looking at our Italian portfolio or whatever? So that happened. So no, it did not go as we thought, but in a very good way.
Yeah, talk about growing organically.
Yeah.
And we added when we had to add. When we didn't have any more hours of the day to put in, we had to add another person to do something else. Or
I think we were flattered that people would come to such a small company that to have two people didn't know what they were doing and want us to represent their wines, and I think that was very flattering.
And over the years, we've said this so many times, we were just blessed to be able to hire people smarter than we were. So the first person that we hired, this first full-time employee, was a delivery driver who had been driving for delivering wine for 10 years. So he
for a much larger company.
Yeah, so he could tell us what to do, how to set up a warehouse, and how to make
That's true.
deliveries.
I learned how to sell to restaurants from a guy we hired in Richmond, who I didn't know what, I made so many mistakes walking into the restaurant at the wrong time of day. I didn't know what we were doing.
My first sales call, the customer had to tell me, I would tell him a price, and he said, no, you're supposed to tell me the price that you're going to charge me, not the price that I'm supposed to sell it for. So we were really clueless.
It brings up an interesting point. I'm curious about the differences in selling to different types of entities, whether it's wine shops or restaurants. So what have you learned over the years? What are the kind of key points in selling to the various places you sell to?
I think consultative selling is very important, meaning that rather than saying this is what I have in my bag today, this is what I'm going to show you because this is what I want to show you. We often tell our salespeople, you first have to determine what will help the customer's business. And that doesn't matter whether it's retail or restaurants. What's going to help make your customer successful? And some of that, the best salespeople, not just in our company and others, are really good at going around and looking around a wine shop, for instance, and finding out what's missing.
Okay.
And then pointing that out to the customer and then providing a solution to that so that everybody wins in that case. So I think that's a big one. But I think we can say that you want to provide something that'll help their business. And by sometimes helping their businesses, you're giving something their customer wants that maybe they don't realize that customer wants. And also, I think, because of the passion, I think it's also okay to have something in your bag, something you want to show that you're passionate about. So it may not be something the customer's, because if that was the case, we never would have sold Oregon, right? We would just sold them, varietal California or whatever it was at the time. So I think I'm a good mixture of that. But I think the one thing that a lot of distributors, including us, have had to learn over the years is that you really want to provide something to your customer to make him successful or her successful. Because if they're not successful, we can't be successful.
With restaurants specifically, you mentioned going at the wrong time of day even. Was that harder to sell to restaurants than to wine shops? Is that more difficult to get on a wine list?
It is, because the scope is much smaller. In a wine shop, they'll have maybe thousands of different opportunities, whereas a restaurant wine list may have 30.
As a new distributor, retail's always easier because a retailer is in this nationwide battle of hitting things in the right price point and still being able to make margin. And so if you're new and you're not everywhere, that's an opportunity for them to be able to find something maybe that's not across the street, that they've got to battle on price and they race to the bottom. So that goes quickly. But restaurants, I guess I would say are overall more loyal because you develop the relationships and it seems the placements tend to stay longer unless a wine really catches on at retail. So it's a different type of selling,
It's a longer term.
longer term selling. Yeah. So it takes longer to get into a restaurant on average. Yeah.
But they would be more loyal to the brand.
But they'd be
a
more
lot
loyal.
of times.
Yeah.
I'm also curious, obviously, you're not selling your own product here, you're selling other people's products, but you still have the passion behind it, that similar to what a grower
It
would
becomes
have.
our product, really.
So tell me about the rejection. I'm curious about like dealing with people who don't want it for whatever reason, and going back out there again and getting back getting back on the horse again.
Well, that's selling in general. I've always said that the word no is a temporary condition.
In every aspect of our business.
It doesn't mean no forever. It just means no today. Until and I will say I've done a lot of cold calling with new salespeople where I'll go out. The owner goes out, or at the time, the little business, and we have 2 sales reps. I would go out and work the market a lot. Just go along with the salesperson. And I will say that in all the years, that's 26 years, and I don't do nearly as much of it as I used to. I haven't done hardly any in the last few years actually, but I will say all the years that I've done, I've never been thrown out. Because I think a lot of salespeople, even really confident, salespeople that really seem to come across as being not shy, let's say, extroverted salespeople. A lot of them are secretly shy of going into in the thought of the rejection you get. And what I try to tell salespeople is, you will never make more progress in a sales call than you will on the very first call. You'll make because you enter and they look at you like, who are you? Leave. And by the end, if you ask the right questions, by the time you leave, you've already developed a bit of a relationship. You've gone to, why are you here? Leave, I hate you, and there's a cat in my lap. and to all the way to, oh, I hope I can see you again sometime. So so that's just been my own experience.
It wouldn't be an Oregon wine interview without an animal showing up at some points. This is perfect.
Maybe there's a dog
Perfect.
come around, jump in your lap.
So the reason you guys are in town this week was to do visits with your growers. I'm curious. Obviously, you do that regularly. What's the point of it? What's the goal behind your visits? What are you trying to get out of these trips this week?
This week was because we're normally here in Harvest to help out on the lines, doing whatever, just to say hi, help them feed their crew, whatever's needed. We weren't able to do that this year, and we also come back about this time of year just to check and see, now that everything's bedded down, barreled down. What happened? What's the harvest like? What can we expect? What story do you have to tell?
Yeah, so you can think of it this way: they're kind of ground level during harvest. If you ask them about harvest, they can tell you a little bit, but they're in the thick of things. But you can kind of see what's going on, and then to make that, a few weeks later when things are much quieter in December, you can come back and talk to them, and then they have, let's say, a 3,000-foot view, and then later on they can have a 30,000-foot view. But you can and we can already go back and tell our sales team and start giving information to our people about what's going on in Oregon, because it is a really important part of our business from the standpoint of our portfolio, but also our dollars.
So obviously 2020 was a tricky growing year for a number of reasons.
Yes.
You don't have to single anybody out, but I'm curious kind of what your general impressions are of the 2020 harvest so far, or what the growers are telling you so far about 2020.
It's tiny.
Yeah, it's tiny. It's in many cases very difficult. There are a lot of people looking at different things about how they're going to approach it, whether they're going to release things early because of all the chemistry about how the effect of smoke on wine grapes will affect the binding, the chemical binding in the finished wine, and when in the cycle that they can possibly sell it and have it be something that's interesting to the consumer. But I think there's still a lot of question marks.
But because of the fires that happened around the area, and the smoke that affected different vineyards in different locations in different ways, because of the geology of this area, and how things settled up or down, or we found really all over the board on this trip this week.
When we think back of representing 26 Oregon vintages, some have been easy, Some have been difficult. Some have been unfairly difficult. When the it was called the wine press will slam a vintage before the first grape is picked. That didn't serve anybody well. You know, it's deceptive to the consumer. It's hard on the grower. It's hard on the distributor. It's hard on everybody. And the one we always cite the most was 2007. We're still drinking 2007s. They're wonderful. Yet that vintage was condemned before the first grape was picked. And that was really a shame. Really a shame. It's almost like sometimes there's a need to slam a vintage or two every once in a while just to show that you're not somehow too close. I don't know. I don't know.
A cheerleader.
You can tell it bothers me when I do it because, okay, if it's a bad vintage, if it's a difficult vintage, you point it out. That's fine. That's fair. But if you really, you know, before the first grape is picked, really. But yeah, so that's just part of our business, the ups and downs.
So when you have a vintage like that, like a 2007, and 2011, I know was another one people talk about being difficult.
Not as hard. Yeah, 2007 was the one that probably us as a distributor took us, you know, average 3 years to sell the vintage, because every time we reorder, you know, there would still be 2007 at the property. 2011, I think, if I remember correctly, was a smaller vintage, and I think it sold easier. And I love those wines, and I love 2007s.
But sevens also, just economically, when they came out.
That's true also. That's true. We were heading into the recession, or in the recession.
Sure.
That's true. Good point.
So one thing we've heard a lot about in our conversations with winemakers over the years has been kind of the change in distribution in the last couple of decades, obviously. The idea that there used to be more distributors than there were wineries, and now it's kind of flip-flopped in their mind. So tell me about what you've seen as the biggest changes in distribution since you've been a part of it.
Well, first of all, that's not always true. And I think it has been written all over, you know, you see articles about how there used to be so many thousand distributors and now there's 250 or something. Well, there's at least 250 in Washington, D.C., so that can't be true. There's got to be more than 500 in New York City. So that, I would say in certain markets there are more distributors than there used to be. And clearly in some markets there's one or two. So I can only speak to our markets, and there's more distributors than there ever have been.
But also more wineries.
But I think
as
what
they've grown, you know, as
that's
wine,
true.
wine regions have grown.
But I think what's also changed is, particularly in retail, and particularly where it's a pretty wide open, legally, people can do whatever they want to do. The grocery stores have taken away local buying authority, and what that does then is you get this homogenization, be the right word, of their market. So if you're a grocery store that's nationwide and you want to have every wine the same in every store, that means it has to be an extremely large winery, which in the case of Oregon pushes most of those wines out. And not just Oregon, but since we're talking about Oregon, it's the case. So that's had a very detrimental effect. And in fact, in some of our markets, we call them wine deserts, where the grocery stores have put almost all the independent retailers out of business. Restaurants are fine, for the most part. Some of them are corporate, but usually the independent movement's reasonably strong most places. But it's the retail that's been really hurt, the local retail, where individual shops. The most, I'd say the most savvy have survived, going up against the big corporate giants. And it would be fine that, you know, it's fine for corporate giants to sell wine, but they do tend to want to buy wines that are made in large quantities so they can have
carry them nationally. Makes it easier.
Yeah, makes it a lot easier.
For sure.
Makes more sense for what they're doing. And they're looking at scan data. They're looking at the numbers more than they're looking at the wine, I would think.
At the stories that we tell.
Yeah, they're not buying the wine for the stories, and for the terroir necessarily. They're buying it for if it sells and it makes them money, they're going to put it everywhere. You can't blame them really, but it doesn't work for people like us and our growers.
So for Oregon specifically, tell me what the biggest changes you've seen to the Oregon industry, again, in kind of your years of being part of it, both as consumers and as distributors. What are the biggest changes you've seen, and what's the biggest, how has the demand changed for Oregon wine in your eyes?
Well, I mentioned the S-curve, and particularly on Pinot Noir. Oregon Chardonnay is still a bit of a push, but that's okay. It gives us something to work on. You know, we personally love Oregon Chardonnay. We have some real enthusiasts in our market. But it's not like Pinot. I mean, it's still a bit of a slog. to take it out there. But people will say, I love this wine. Oh, I can't sell this wine. Come on, man. You know, but I'll tell you a little story. Maybe that'll answer your question. Some years ago, one of our growers here, and I honestly don't remember who it was, asked me about the Burgundies that we carry, and I said we don't really carry much Burgundy anymore. Even though, you know, all of us in here, everybody drinks Burgundy, and it's like, you don't carry much Burgundy. Why? And I said, because you won. Oregon won. And in fact, Oregon used to play second fiddle to California Pinots, which used to drive me crazy. Because I always loved Oregon so much with the climate and what the purity of the wine that came to market. I just always preferred them over California Pinots. But that's not even a question anymore. You know, Oregon has won. In my view, Oregon has won.
And the collaboration that we saw at the beginning on a much smaller scale, just as consumers and enthusiasts, the collaboration between Oregon growers, as we got to know more of them and really represent more of them, you know, went into business with them, and seeing and even advising when someone someone gets phylloxera, you know, for the first time, we tell them, well, call this guy. He's been dealing with it in their vineyards. Or they get a stuck fermentation and they start calling around, and it's, you don't see that in other wine growing regions, and it's just it's wonderful. It is really wonderful.
I think
to see that.
It is one of the key reasons for Oregon's success. Really is the collaborative culture here. You don't see that as much in other places. Anywhere else we've been on the planet, in the wine growing planet, have we seen the how, you know, the guy down the road is your competitor in one sense, but I don't think most people look at it that way. It's a real, you know, the old thing about the rising tide. I think that's, nowhere is it more true than here.
And then working, you know, being in the business for as long as we have, working with, you know, meeting interns who then become assistant winemakers, who then become winemakers and owners in their own right, and to see the generations coming about, and how much more history for the vintages, you know, to be able to learn more and more about each vintage. But everything that they're bringing, all the intelligence, the thought behind what they're doing, the experience, it's just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal talking to some of these guys and seeing where they've come from, the days where we were harvesting in the rain at Amity. You know,
True. If you follow the evolution of our Oregon portfolio, you will find that. Where'd you find this guy? Well, this guy was working for this guy that we were representing, and we followed him to this place, and
almost
that's
the
true.
begats.
Yeah.
The Oregon Wine Bible, yes, begat. I love it. How would you, if you had to define, how would you define your role? What is the role of the distributor? What is your role when it comes to both the sides you're serving? How do you define what role distribution plays in sort of the wine industry at large?
We translate. We really seek to be partners, both with our wine growers and our customers, to be the best link that we can to translate from the dirt to the table, basically. But,
and our growers want us to sell their wines and have as much exposure as possible in the market, and mostly most people want it on and off premise, in restaurants, in retail. They want it in both places, and we try to do the best job of that we can. And you know, sometimes it doesn't. You know, a particular wine won't fit in a particular place because of personal preferences or whatever. But for the most part, if we're a good distributor, we're trying to get as many points around and around that no matter where a person might go to eat or to buy wine or whatever it is, that they can have that exposure to our producers.
and 2 parts sales and 1 part matchmaking, or something like that.
So obviously we're talking to you. The reason we're outdoors today, we're dealing with COVID-19. It's December 2020, and we're still dealing with the effects of that. I'm curious what the effects that has had on your sort of work life, business life this year, and what effects it's had on in your perspective, on wine sales.
All over the board. And we also talked to our comrades in other states. Some people are actually up year over year, just like the wineries here in Oregon. Some of them are up year over year. It really depended on what channel you were in to begin with. Retail's exploded as people are drinking more at home, and it saved our backsides. So we're doing fine. It's just a matter of, and I think the growers the same way. Growers that were mostly in restaurants have been hurt more, because you don't necessarily go from primarily restaurants to suddenly going into retail channel automatically. But the people that were the producers that were mostly retail,
wine clubs
have been pretty they have
helpful.
a really strong wine club. Other things like that are doing extremely well. So we're doing fine. We're not sure. I'm sure our competitors are all over the board, just like our comrades in other states are all over the board. But I think everybody's doing okay. It's just that I think in a lot of cases, in our case, we had to really restructure our company, because it's a different world out there right now, and I think it will be permanently.
We walked into this 70% restaurant, 30% retail, and we walked into it thinking, okay, we now have 30% of our sales. How do we handle this for the year? And we started making plans based on it. But then the retail that stayed open, or even one of our premier shops hasn't been open to the public, but their sales have increased tremendously because they're keeping their staff and customers safe, but they're still able to sell and keep things. But retail has just exploded so much that it's helped bring our business up again.
And necessity is the mother of invention, and so and Beth and I, being sort of naturally entrepreneurial, it sort of taps into our, I don't know, it excites us in a certain way. It was sort of, because it wasn't panicked at all, but it was sit down, what can we do? How can we change to make this work? And it was exciting. I mean, it was crazy back in, say, March, April, May. Just really crazy. We had to we've described it to people as, you're like in a house, you're ripping it down to the studs and starting over again. But it allowed us to bring out our creative juices and really do what we did. And it wasn't just us, our entire team.
Yep.
And if you look at our customers have been amazing. The way they have responded, and even many of the wineries have tried to come out with ways to make it easier for us, to make it easier for our customers. It's been really, I think we'll look back at this period. We always talk about silver linings in this period, and I think there's been many, many silver linings.
We are in awe of some of the ideas that the wineries and our customers have come up with, some of the ways that they've restructured to make this work. It is so exciting. I mean, it's a scary time. It's in business. It's a terrifying time, personally, with everything else going on in the world. But just the business part of it, to watch how our coworkers have stepped up to the plate with just fabulous ideas, and it's been super exciting in this weird time. So, we definitely have found so many silver linings.
Definitely a time that rewards creativity and flexibility, for sure. Rob, you mentioned permanent changes. I'm curious what you see as we come out of the pandemic in the next, hopefully soon, next however long, as things go back to normal, in quotes. What is going to change permanently in your mind? What are you seeing as you look ahead?
Video selling, winemakers permanently now doing things with sales staffs and even with consumers now online, where people can maybe even get. We've seen that this week, where people in Oregon are bottling up small packages to send out to their mailing list, so they can taste with the grower online and buy from them. It's a super idea. Those kind of things I think will stick, for one thing, for sure. I mean, I think not in our favor. I think in some of the markets where restaurants have gone out of business, we're expecting that the first people to come to market with money when this is over with, or even before it's over with, and negotiate good leases, will be chain restaurants, which don't serve us, because they're just like chain retail. They're going to carry things at a national level, which doesn't really serve most of our producers. So I think some of that will happen. I hope it doesn't, but I'm expecting it to happen. But I think but I think also the creativity that came out of this, I think a lot of the things that people have invented have found out that works. Curbside pickups and all that will stick. I think those will stay, making it easier for people in their busy lives to find what they want online, but go by and pick it up themselves or whatever. I think you'll see that. Anything else you can think of? You think will stick from a?
Who knows?
Who knows? I'm not just thinking.
Yeah,
see,
absolutely.
See, since this is going to be kept forever, we'll see how close I can get.
The dangerous thing about making a prediction on camera, right?
Exactly.
Speaking of predictions on camera, the future of the Oregon wine industry. What do you see Oregon wine's industry looking like in the next 5-10 years? Are there any changes you see on the horizon? What's the kind of the outlook for you?
Climate change is our greatest fear. It's not only upsetting the terroir of the vineyards, and this is happening all over the world, but Oregon's near and dear, so we'll just talk about that. But yeah, the fact that sites were chosen specifically based on not just the soil type, but the where the vineyard faces, the varietals that were put into the ground based on its location, all that gets turned on its head. That's the biggest threat to the industry. The fires are dreadful, and I think they're going to be. We've heard a lot of people talk about. I'm glad it's over. Talking, I almost heard like that's my one big horrible fire smoke thing for my career. I don't know if that's the case, unfortunately. So that's the biggest threat to the industry. Yeah, I know you didn't ask about threats, but that's a reality that we're all having to deal with. Yeah, this climate change. It's terrible, and the faster we can address this as a world. The faster we can put a stop to it, at least not make it any worse. But it's you can see it. We had a friend tasting a customer friend tasting in Virginia that he was tasting a whole lineup of Pinots from around the world, including a couple from Oregon, and he asked me about this one wine. He said, "I remember this wine as being more graceful, more elegant, more higher acid, all that. What happened? This thing tastes it's kind of fleshy and flabby. What happened? Did they change winemakers?" And I said, "No, it's climate change, man. That particular year was particularly warm, and your memory is not what you tasted when you tasted it, 15 years ago. That's what worries us."
What about from a varietal perspective? You mentioned Oregon Chardonnay, something you personally love or struggling to sell a little bit, kind of pushing that rock. Obviously, there are other varietals coming on board in Oregon, none with the panache yet of Pinot Noir, but do you see more Gamay, more sparkling, more things like that being sold outside the state? Or are you still thinking kind of Pinot Chardonnay is sort of the bread and butter for Oregon?
Well, it's the bread and butter, but when we started in Oregon, we were selling Riesling and Müller-Thurgau and Gewürztraminer and everything else. So we've seen we didn't come out of the gate just with Pinot and Chardonnay. It's we've kind of seen.
I think Chardonnay will hit it. It's going to hit its S curve as well. I think Chardonnay will. It's not going to be linear. It's not going to be one of these gradual things that goes. It's suddenly somebody is going to write an article at some international level or something, and suddenly there's not going to be enough Oregon Chardonnay. Right now, there's a lot of it that has been planted, so there's a lot coming in, which is making it there's more being tossed into the market. But eventually, I'm convinced it'll be the Pinot curve. There'll be people going, "Oh my gosh, these wines are fabulous," and it'll like that. But again, you have to balance that with climate change. And I think you'll start seeing more vineyards planted north-facing. I mean, it's almost humorous to think when we started this that we could be saying that people would prefer to put a north-facing vineyard, but it might come to that. I think it's already happening, actually.
And winemakers they're doing this because it's a creative outlet. They're creative artists, and you don't want to just play with the same painting, the same materials all the time, and so you're going to experiment with the Tempranillo and all the other varietals, and we see that, and we have for years, and we'll see what catches on and what continues to to grow and be the next darling.
But it's also a point of we teasing each other
Yeah.
here. No, I'm not going to carry your Tempranillo. No, I don't want to taste your Syrah. This is the Willamette Valley. Don't try to get me to buy your Syrah.
Sure.
But it's an ongoing thing because winemakers are very creative and they want to. Here it is. Pinot Noir is one of the most difficult grapes to grow and wines to make of any in the world. Yet they still go out because I make these Pinot Noirs, but I still want to go out and make my fill in the blank Tempranillo or whatever. And but Pinot still will. I mean, I think that the big reason, in my view, besides the collaborative nature of the Oregon wine industry, I think the big reason another big reason that Oregon has succeeded out of state more than Washington has is because Oregon really defined itself as a with the varietals. I mean, California was doing Pinot, but California is more known for Cabernet and Chardonnay. They defined it as varietal, whereas Washington was Cabernet and Merlot, which they had plenty of in California. That was a big one. So you had the collaborative, but you also had the choice of varietals. Was a huge boon to Oregon to having something that they could say as their own. When you think of Argentina, you think of Malbec. Right, and if you think of Burgundy, you think of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. You think of Australia, you think of Shiraz, right? You think of Oregon, you think of Pinot Noir. You think of Washington, you think of
California.
California varietals, and I think that's why Washington struggled. They make great wines, but I think they've always been up against, and I don't think they've ever clearly defined themselves as a wine region like Oregon has.
So what about the future for yourselves and for your business? What do you see as you look ahead for the two of you and for Roanoke Valley Wine Company?
People ask that a lot because I think they're worried that we're going to say, okay, we've been in this all along, and we're going to. But I say without any doubt that I still I'm optimistic for the future. The only thing that concerns me is climate change. I make that clear. But wines have never been better. I'm still enthusiastic about what our growers are doing. I still love the industry. I hope you love the industry too. Still love the industry, even though we've been in it quite a while now. I've never tired of it. There's always something new, and I'm very optimistic for the future. And I don't, I might keel over before I walk away from this because it's been a great ride. It's been fun. It's really been a wonderful time.
And the people we work with, the people we employ, when we say this is a family company, we mean it's a family company. We thank our coworkers for being part of the RVWC family. This is, this whole industry is part of us. It's part of our community.
And I think a lot of the growers we work with that have been in this business a long time as well, I think they're taking the same, I get the feeling that they're kind of on the same sort of wavelength that we are, that we're going to keep going and keep going and keep going, and it's not going to be, we're going to turn this age and we're going to hang it up and walk away and go buy a beach house somewhere. That's just, we love the industry. I think we all do. We're all passionate, and so we just want to stay in it.
And as to looking forward to see what the future has in mind, what the future has in store for this industry, 2020. I mean, who could have ever seen 2020 coming? How can we be prognosticators and see what the future will hold, knowing what we've just been dealt?
Yeah, I figure if we all make it through this in one piece, we'll do okay. We'll do okay.
All right, one last question for you. It's one we like to ask of couples in the wine industry who are making wine together, but I'm curious, key to a successful marriage and having a company together, having a business together.
I don't know if those are.
I almost said this earlier when she was talking. Is even though we went into business together, we had this dream as a married couple of starting a business together. In fact, I've talked in front of groups of people before to ask about starting a business, like an entrepreneurial class or sort of thing, and said, don't go into business with your spouse. Not that we're a great business couple, but
We're great business partners.
But it is very difficult in a marriage. It is very difficult raising children, and that's hard enough. But when you're sharing, you have the children and you're sharing a business, it's tough. It's tough. We don't recommend it, but we've done it very successfully. But don't recommend it. Don't do that.
We truly tell people not to do it.
What was the key to your success then?
Our first employee, the one who just retired, sat us down within about a week or two of him being on board. And he said, okay, wait. You're both telling me to do different things. So you need to decide who's going to do what in this business. And he really made us sit down and say, okay, what are you going to be in charge of and what am I going to be in charge of?
Because remember, I was not in the business full time for 3.5 years, first 3.5 years. So when I came in, I must have been like coming in, and suddenly the second person's there and telling everybody different things than what the first person told them.
And I'd never been in sales before, so I had no experience in sales. And that was the bulk of what we're doing, just going out and introducing all these wines. So we really had to sit down and think who was going to do what, and it just made a lot more sense personality-wise. I'm the mom of the company. I'm the one that takes care of everybody and makes sure that we all have health plans and everybody's getting their flu shots. I'm the one that makes the pimento cheese, and just makes sure that everybody is taken care of. So the operations ended up very comfortably going with me.
So we made a really clear delineation of what Beth does and what I do, and that's made all the difference. People, I think, quickly understand that they don't need to talk to her about certain things, and they don't need to talk to me about certain things. Sometimes suppliers, growers, agents, whoever would come in, talk to Beth, and then they come into my office somehow because I was them. I have no idea, but they'd come in maybe because I was the other owner. They walk into my office and I'd say, I don't need to hear it.
And he was great at doing this because I've worked with a lot of contractors over the years, building buildings and remodeling and buying trucks and everything else. So in the South, being a woman, the generation, they would naturally, the men in the industry would naturally go to him first. And Rob was always really, really good at saying, you're talking to the wrong Crittenden.
Particularly if you're talking about around construction and all that, she's way better anyway.
So it's without that backup, without that delineation and us really understanding who is going to do what.
But we've seen this in other couples in our industry that hasn't been as successful, as where that's not that clear line is not there, where they're arguing about the same stuff, and you can't do that. You've got to know who's doing what, and you have to respect the other's authority in those areas. Otherwise, because on top of business partners, then you got the marriage. Whoa, that's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover here today that we should have covered? Kind of an open mic here at the end.
No, I think we've said it. We're incredibly optimistic about where Oregon's going. It's doing nothing but getting better. The biggest challenge is climate change, but the know-how is just getting better and better and better. And we see nothing but positive things in the future for the industry.
And the people who have who accepted us right at the beginning in this new venture of ours, and who have supported us as we've grown and given us the opportunity to support others here as they've grown, it's just been invaluable. It's been such a brilliant relationship and a really wonderful supporting community all the way around. We're really, really blessed.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time, for making this work in your schedule and sitting out in the cold with us here today. Appreciate your time and your stories, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.